Hey, what's up, man? I know we've been trying to work this for the last couple of days. We had some technical difficulties last week, but bro, it's good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man.
I've been a long time fan. I've been lurking in the shadows on the gram, and I think what initially intrigued me was your handle where it said "Dads don't babysit." I'm like,
Yeah.
shit, I've said that a lot. So tell me a little bit about how that came to be, the idea of dads don't babysit.
Yeah, actually, I was on a call with a friend of mine who had just had a baby, and at this point, I might have been three deep with kids. I might have had four at that point. I can't remember, but I was on a call with him, and he was doing something. He was like, "Hey, man, if you hear the little one, I'm babysitting right now, so I wanted to let you know, like, you might hear a little." And I was like, "Hey, man, we're gonna stop right there. Dads don't babysit, dude. Like, you're being a dad. So if I hear him, cool. Like." And it was one of those things where after that, I was kind of like, that's totally true. It was that handle was either dads don't babysit or my kids cuss because I do, and that's way too long. So
I like that too. It's funny because sometimes, especially with my oldest, I'll be debating with him or maybe even like trying to correct him or, lead
Mhm.
him in the right direction. And he'll say something like, damn it, that's what I would have said. And it's amazing how much they pay attention to the way that we show up, the things that we
Yeah,
do, both the good things, but also the bad things too. They pick that stuff up,
absolutely.
maybe even more so the bad things, it seems like.
Right. That's literally what I was gonna say. Like, why does it feel like I say like I'm like, hey man, do this, or I say these things that are so great, and then I say one F bomb, and then that's the word I hear from my 3-year-old. I'm like, ah, you
Yeah.
tank.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there things that you personally, I mean, look, here's the thing is like I've had some of my own personal struggles over the past several months. And
Mm,
um I think it's easy when we're on Instagram for us to prop ourselves up. Like we show the
mhm.
highlight reel. And then
Yeah.
I think it's easy for people to assume that we feel like we know everything, even though we know internally we don't. But are there some things that you personally struggle with fatherhood that you see as being pretty common with a lot of guys that they deal with as well?
Yeah, actually, that's kind of been what started all this. And the truth is, like, I find myself what I end up doing when I start to feel like I'm struggling is I start to back off. So like people who follow me may see they'll be like, "Where's Nate been? He hasn't been on." And that's probably because I'm going through something where I'm just like, I don't have anything to say right now because I feel like anything I would say would feel like a complete and utter fraud. But that's where like that's kind of where all this came from. I grew up in a traditional house. My dad was a pastor, and I actually kind of followed in those footsteps for a while. But through that, I went through like I mean, lots of things like "spare the rod, spoil the child" is a proverb that I've heard before. Like kids should be seen and not heard. Spanking was normal. That does not mean that like we were beaten or
These
anything
aren't
like that.
abusive or anything, sure.
Yeah, yeah, I would never say it was that way. But it's one of those things where I grew up in that, and then when I had my first kid, my oldest is now 19. When I had him, like I just kind of like fell right into that norm. But when I took him to college last year, it like punched me in the face that I didn't have I still have influence with him, but not the way I used to. I don't have him all the
Mm.
time. He's not around. Like, and I sat on my front porch and was like, wow, like this is the end of an age. And now what am I gonna do? And I realized there was a lot of like regretting going on inside me. Like, man, I could have done that so much better. And so I started basically going, what can I do differently with the youngers that I screwed up with the older ones? And that's really been how the journey started. But I will say that the moment I started doing that and started talking about it, I get pushback, and I can almost always tell who's a without even looking. If I just see the handle and it doesn't say like Dave Smith kind of thing, if it's just some handle, I can be like that's a guy. I don't even have to look
Mm.
because there's so many guys that they bang against this concept of actually it's not that they're banging against kindness. I think they're worried that we're going to raise sons that are weak because that's what I mean. I've been called a
Mm.
snowflake and things like that, and I'm going. This is hilarious that that's what we're saying to someone who is literally just trying to tell you, let's be kind to our children and try something new. And that's really what happened for me is I was just like, I'm going to do it a different way. And you think about a pendulum, you swing it one way and it swings all the way back to the other side. So I've slowly tried to I've tried to slow that pendulum so I'm not like completely permissive.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, I've also tried to go, all right, is this my hang up, or is this is this a hill I need to die on, or is this something I can just, I was the dad who always said no, always. Like, I mean, my poor oldest, I've literally apologized to him because I've been like, I mean, I apologize a lot. Like, I tell people all the time, your number one thing is one, relax, and two, just get ready to humble yourself and apologize pretty much all the time, because I don't, like you said, I don't know everything. And what I was doing when I was a younger father is I was like, well, I know everything. I'm right all the time, and that's just not true. So I started apologizing to him and trying to just change how I was doing. But I've tried to slow that pendulum swing to just be able to go, all right, how do I bring it back to a centered place where I can still be like, we're still firm, we still have rules, but man, I don't have to, like, I could probably relax a lot. Like, that's the number one,
Yeah.
relax.
Isn't it interesting that we equate kindness with being feminine?
Yeah,
Look, I've been there and I've been the authoritarian and I've been the disciplinarian, and
hmm,
it didn't work. Like, I was miserable. My kids were miserable. My ex-wife was miserable. like,
yeah,
like, I don't want to be
yeah,
like this, but I think you can still be disciplined. You can still be that stable leadership figure. I think kindness, and I don't like to say it this way, but I'll say it this way for the sake of argument. Kindness can be used as a strategy or a tactic, if you will. That's a little
yeah.
cold, but for developing and fostering influence and credibility with your family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, seriously, if you want kind kids, you're going to have to be kind, because I can hear them interacting and they talk like me. So
Mhm.
they'll use my tone. They may not understand tone in their context just yet, but the younger ones, I'll hear them and I'm like, oh, that sounds so bad. Like, it's so bad to hear sometimes them talk like me. And I'm like, I look at my wife and I'll be like, do I sound like that? She's like,
He's like,
yeah.
yeah, just like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. But you know what's funny is that you said it, but it's totally true. It's like kindness as even as a tactic, but understanding if I'm kind to my children. I actually spoke to this a long while back about microchimerism, which is basically like the cells of the baby, like T cells from the baby when it's growing inside his mom. They go out and like they'll heal. Like if mama gets hurt or there's something going on, like they'll go out and they'll heal, but those stay. And so I saw this study where they found cells from the baby in mama's brain, and they're all over her body. And so I just kind of made mention to my wife at one point, and it kind of became a thing. But I was like, it's crazy when I interact with my kids in a way that grates on her, like, or that like feels like I'm not kind of them. It changes my relationship with her, right?
Mm,
She responds as if I'm doing it to her. And so I mean, how I handle my relationship with my kids full on affects my wife, whether it's because of those cells or just because I'm being a jerk and she's watching me be a jerk to her kids. You're fully affecting
yeah.
you're inciting the mama bear.
Well,
And
that's
that's
her nature, right? Her nature is to
right.
ensure that her kids are taken care of. Even when she has kids, it's even more so than her relationship with you. Again, the way I'm saying it might sound a little cold, but you become almost in a way, this is maybe a little archaic or outdated, but let's just take it from a biological
Sure.
standpoint. You almost become solely a means of providing for her and her children. And again, I know that's not the entire picture,
Yeah.
but if you're not
Yeah.
doing that, then she's turned off by that, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, and I agree with you. Like, there's so many nuances in there.
Of
But
course, yeah.
like, if you're just speaking to it, like trying to speak directly to it, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What
You
so
almost
so
I
help
want to
me
say you take a back
clarify.
seat.
We'll say it again.
I said, I don't want to say you take a back seat, but there's things in mama change. And
Right.
my dad actually put it this way. He said, you bring home two strangers. You bring home a woman, you don't know who that is anymore because she doesn't know who she is now as a mom, and you bring home a baby. So there's a whole
Whoa.
bunch of new learning happening. So
That's it. I'm writing that down. Bringing home two strangers. That's really interesting. Your dad said
yeah,
that? That's cool.
yeah, my dad told me that.
Help me clarify what you're talking about the cells, because I didn't quite grasp that. So you're saying
Sure.
in this findings or whatever it was that the way I understood it is that when a baby is maybe nursing or connected with mama bear, like those cells from the baby are actually consumed or inhaled or whatever it may be
Mm.
through the mother. Is that what maybe I misunderstood?
No, that's fine. It's actually in utero. So when the baby is still growing in mama, in order to protect itself, and I'm not a doctor, but I just was reading studies on this and was blown away by this. The term for it is microchimerism. But the baby's like the T cells from the baby as it's growing will like go out into mama's body and help her body heal or help things go along to
Really?
keep itself safe. But they have found like decades later, they've found those cells in mama, like all over her body. But the ones that caught me were the ones in her brain, and that was obviously it had to be post mortem that they did this. But they're like, this is the reason they found them is because they found male DNA in a mama, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is, and that's how that kind of like they went down that
Male
rabbit trail.
DNA from her biological son is what you're
From
saying.
her biological sons, yeah. And so they
Whoa,
even
that's
say,
interesting.
yeah, I've heard it said that even like if the pregnancy doesn't go full term, or they lose the baby, they may still have those cells in their body as well. It's kind of crazy.
So not only obviously is the mother protecting the baby, but in a way the baby is also protecting the mother through the healing process of those T cells.
Exactly. And then it
Whoa.
was what makes, like, again, I grew up in the church, so I come from this whole concept of like God as in the Christian form of God. And I go, well, that for me, I go, that makes sense, because we've had to create a way for the mother to change how she interacts with the world. And instead of just being interacting with the world as her own self, she now becomes this mama bear who at all costs she protects the kids. And I mean, there's a cool connection there that dads don't get, but we can foster a relationship with them, but we don't get that kind of cellular connection, which is really neat.
Yeah, that is interesting. So, look, I'm gonna disclose a lot of things that aren't redeeming qualities about myself in this conversation, but
I probably
uh,
will too.
yeah, I think a lot of men feel this way. So let's just address it for what it is and speak the truth and be honest about it. And
Okay.
so I remember often telling my ex-wife that, I remember when she said, "Do you want to have more?" And I said, "If you could have them at like 3 or 4, definitely." And I was teasing, but also like that's not a bad idea. And
Yeah,
and the
right.
reason is because I think around that age where children, sons, daughters start to walk, they start to talk, they start to engage. You can play with them. They're a little more dynamic. They're a little bit more responsive to you. Is really
Mhm.
probably the time where I think the father comes into the equation as a real influential, connected figure. But before that, it seems like baby's got a nurse with mom. Like all the baby cares about at that point is making sure that it's stays alive, not obviously consciously, but biologically.
Right.
So there's not really a deep connection. I mean, it didn't grow in our body, contrary
Right.
to popular belief that men can get pregnant and all that stuff. That's a whole other conversation. Um, there's just not a lot of connection there. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts about that?
So here's what I'll say. I think we feel that.
Right.
But when they're like, so I would say that from our perspective, absolutely, because we're interacting, they're starting to talk, and so you can like interact with them a lot more, and
Mhm.
we feel it. However, from like birth, babies connect through, like they bond through like physical touch. I spent a lot of time, so we had our last two at home, and
Mm.
so I caught my youngest boy, and then obviously was part of like holding on to and keeping, like, I mean, I carry them around all the time when they're little like that, and all I want them to do is hear. I want them to hear my voice. I want them to, I have a deeper voice obviously than my wife, so I want them to feel that vibration. So I keep them close to my chest. When you
Mm.
do skin to skin, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there for mamas that dads can participate in. All you gotta do, I mean, just take your shirt off, put the kid against you, like wrap a blanket over you, and just let them sleep on you. I mean, the best kind of some of the best times as a parent, as a dad, I'm like, shoot, oh, it's time for the baby to sleep. I'll hold him. Like, let me hold him. Let me fall asleep with him. Like
Yeah.
I'm,
So
I'm
nice,
being
isn't
a
it?
I'm being a hardcore dad while I sleep. It's awesome.
Hey,
But
kill two
they
birds
get
with one stone.
that's right. So they get your smell, they get your voice, like all of those things that we don't really feel or recognize, but it's creating a bond with that kid that actually, in my opinion, goes pretty far. When I was in college, one of my professors, we were talking about intercultural studies, and he always said when you go to another country, the best move, if you're going to be there for a while, I was talking about missionary work, was to be picked up by nationals. Because when you come to a new place, and you don't know anything, and it's a whole new experience, the first person that will take you in is you kind of latch onto them, and they're your people. And so you
Mm,
hold on. And he always suggested, if you're trying to learn the language and you're trying to do all that, you should do that with the nationals, because you will become more attached to the nationals than you would if you met with than if missionaries picked you up from the airport or whatever. And
sure.
he called it bonding in that sense. And then he always referenced it to babies, because when you think comes into a whole new experience, it's had this nice warm home inside of mama, and when he or she's born, now it's a whole new experience. It's gone through a traumatic experience, really, when it's went through the birthing process. And so he's going to bond with whoever is going to hold him and keep him safe. So dad actually gets to be a part of that, if you're willing to take a hold of him, just walk around with him. I mean, I take midnight shifts constantly with the babies and just hum. It's so crazy because the song I always hum is from the Hobbit. It's the
Oh,
Misty
really?
Mountains. It's like real deep, and so I would
Yeah,
hum
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
until, it's so funny now, because my youngest is almost 3, and if she's all frustrated and mad, I know she's tired, and I pick her up and I start humming that, she now fights me because she's like, "I don't want to sleep," that kind of thing, because she
She
knows she
knows
used to
what's gonna
just fall
happen.
asleep to it.
That's funny. I usually sing my kids like so people laugh if they've ever heard me sing or whatever. Maybe they're over or a friend's over and they hear me sing to my kids, and I always sing one of uh one of a couple songs. There's a handful, but the ones that stand out are the national anthem. I sing that
Mm,
often to my kids, and for
yeah.
whatever reason, I love singing Gilligan's Island to the kids. As they fall asleep. And my daughter and I have like little hand movements for Gilligan's Island, and we always have a good
Oh,
time.
that's fun. Your
Um,
kids are probably the only ones at their age that even know that TV show at all, right?
I'm
Or at
sure of
least the
it. I'm
song.
sure of it. Yeah, the song. So there's a couple things, and look, I want to get a little deep into this, and maybe even subjects
Sure,
that might feel taboo or whatever. So a couple that I wrote down
sure.
as you were talking. Number one, I think there's a little bit of maybe a stigma a little bit or a little awkwardness or weirdness of the skin to skin thing, especially
Mm,
between man and a baby. And
mhm,
it's interesting that we have that weirdness. At least I did. It was a little awkward at first, but it's interesting because if you think about as we grow older, man, I bought a couple of different mats. There, I can see them right here outside of my office here. Um, bought them off Amazon, and I love to wrestle with my kids,
oh,
and
yeah.
obviously they're learning a skill, they're getting strong, but also there's the physical connection. I truly believe there's a transfer of energy between the way that when I'm wrestling with them, and if I, grab their arm, or I'm squeezing one of them or whatever it might be. There's actual
Mhm,
a connection that's like a tangible, real, measurable connection there. Have
absolutely.
you have you talked to many guys who feel weird at all about the skin to skin thing, or is there a awkwardness about it that you've experienced or seen?
I haven't come across too many that are like weird, like they're weirded out by it.
Mhm.
It's one of those things where I think because they're so tiny, it's kind of like I don't know I don't know about like other guys, but I'm like, I just want to snuggle this tiny little thing. Like, get in here and let's, just bring them close. So I haven't really talked to many guys that are like, yeah, no, I don't think I can do that. A lot of dads, and I will say my first little, I didn't know that we're born with two fears, right? The fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. I didn't know
Okay.
that. So like I picked my little guy up and I'm like, oh, it's a baby. Play with him. And I like tossed him a little bit. And
Oh
dude,
yeah.
I thought I broke him. He like put his arms straight out and he's like,
He's like,
"Ugh,"
no.
like freaked out. And I'm like, what'd I do? Like, did I break him? Like, what's going on? So I learned real fast, don't do that. But I didn't know we had those two fears. And so as soon as I did that, he felt that drop and he was like not having it. But as dads, I mean, we have a card, a Christmas card with my third born, Finley, and he's probably 3, maybe 2, and yeah, I think he's 3. I launched him in the air for like we were playing around, and the girl who's the photographer, like snapped a photo. He's literally looking at the camera, and everybody else is watching him, and I've got him about like 10 feet up in the air, away from us. It looks like he's suspended in air. It's hilarious. But I mean, it's kind of like what you're saying, wrestling and doing that. It actually is good for cognitive development, for specifically for boys. It helps them like it helps them understand like boundaries and get out aggression and understand interacting. So Like as far as like the skin to skin thing, I haven't had a lot of people like tell me, oh, that's kind of weird. But it's funny how how we want to interact with our boys and how it's actually beneficial to them that we do it that way. So I always say, I've said to my wife plenty of times, hey, you be mom, I'll be dad. She'll be, upset about how I'm doing something and it's not a bad thing. And she's just like, why are you so rough with them? Or why are you this? Or why? And I'm like, that's because I'm dad. Like, you be mom and I'll be dad. And we're going to do things differently. And one of those things is I'm not saying mothers don't roughhouse with their kids or that they can't, but a lot of times that's where dad comes rolling in and we do that. And it's actually really good for specifically for boys to do that for the cognitive development, which is pretty
I was
cool.
thinking about that. I've heard Jordan Peterson talk a bit about that, about the idea of rough house and rough play. I was
Hmm.
actually thinking about that as I was rolling around on these mats with my son. He did something, I can't remember if he punched me in the nuts or something, right? And I was like, hey, like, we don't do that,
Yeah.
and I said, look, if you're in a street fight and you're in danger, like, do whatever you got to do. Like, you can bite their nuts if you have to. If that's the only option you have, like, do whatever you need to do. But
Do what
like
you got to do.
here, when we're playing, like, these are the rules.
Yeah.
And as I was thinking about that, I was like, oh, no, this is good for him because he learns boundaries.
Hmm.
He learns how to honor and respect boundaries. He learns how to listen. He learns how to cooperate in a set of voluntary constraints or rules. Like, this is
Hmm.
all really good stuff for his development. So
Yeah.
yeah, that wrestling is powerful. All right, so
Yeah.
another one, and this one's a little bit. Look, guys know this and they talk about it, and nobody else talks about it. You said something. You said that I think it was your third or fourth that you delivered, right? You caught that baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Caught him.
Yeah. So a lot of guys are going to talk about, ruining their sex life, right? You hear
Yeah.
that a lot. It's like
Yeah.
just, and I did. I was like, stay north of the waist. And by the time I had my third or fourth, I was like, no, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem to affect my sex life. Like, I was still
Right.
attracted to my wife, and that wasn't an issue.
Right.
But I know this is an issue for a lot of guys. Like, I'm curious about your
Yeah.
perspective and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna sound harsh because when it comes to stuff like that, I'm like, come on, guys, like seriously, like let's man up, like, and I don't mean that to be mean. I mean, if it really freaks you out, I don't know what you can do with that. But like usually, I would say, listen, it's amazing. Like the whole birthing process is insane. My wife is superhuman, right? And I'm like, that's your like she's awesome. We're very if you're going to call it a traditional style couple, that's us. Like she's like my superhuman power is that I grow children and make them and then have babies and then I can feed them with my body. Like so we're on the same level there and that's wonderful. But like your wife is superhuman. They can they can give birth to another human. Like for me, that's amazing. So I, I mean, like when it came down to that, the midwife was like, "You want to catch that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do this." And
Heck yeah, I do.
I mean,
Yeah.
I just kind of what I would say is guys that fear that haven't like gone through that yet. If you go through it, you probably turn it kind of like you said at the third or fourth, you're like, "This is crazy. It's not going to ruin my second life," and I don't think it will. I think that most guys would come back around and be like, just see their wife as even more amazing. It makes you fall in love with her more, I think. At least that's what it does for me, you know?
I like that. That's interesting. I mean, I wrote that down here. I'm taking notes as we go, but you're talking
So,
about honoring your wife. And I think there's this idea in culture, and it seems to get progressively worse, especially with the degenerate society in which we live, is like, you don't care about your woman. You care about her as and I've heard the term, a masturbatory tool rather
oh,
than
yeah,
the mother of your children, or this soul that you can grow and develop and learn from, and who can, I wouldn't say complete, but who can complement and add to your life in a way that you're just
yeah,
not able to do on your own.
yeah. There's so much respect that you can find in all that she is. And that's part of it. I mean, I remember a friend and I were talking like this goes like outside of giving birth, but like even conversations, like one of my friends was like, oh man, I'll never be able to see like if she has her period, she needs to be like away and hidden. And I'm like, dude, that is now as a father of five and where I am in my relation, I'm like, come on man, like we can mature from there and know that at 18, 19, oh gross, that's horrible. But the truth is that's what makes her able to like bring humans into this world, and that is amazing. And I'm not saying you got to be like all around it all the time, but so many guys are like, I'm not going to the store and buying tampons and all that. I mean, you know what? That's a badge of honor for me. Like, I'll put them up there. I don't care. Like, there's no shame in my game. If she needs something, I'm going to get it. Like, I'm totally okay with that. And I think that that's the more we find how the more we find our like find the respect in our wives and the more, or our partners, and the more we can see the like the beauty of who they are and like what they are, the better our life becomes. I said it a while back to my wife. I'm like, you take everything I give and you make it better. If I bring home a paycheck, and you make it work, and I we get this house and you make it a home. Like we for lack of a better word, I bring sperm and you make a human. That's so amazing. I know it takes both, but like everything I give her, and I heard a guy say that, I cannot remember who it was, but he said basically everything you give a woman, she can multiply and make even more. And that's so
Mm.
cool because you've gone to bachelor pads, or when you were a bachelor, like there's nothing on the walls. I mean, I don't have 40 throw pillows on my bed unless I'm married, right? Because that's just not how it goes. But when you walk into a room that you're like, a woman did that for sure, because no guy that I know would do that. I'd have two pillows and maybe a sheet, and there'd be nothing on the walls, and it would look like somebody was like I had a go bag and then just bailed out of my house.
Well, look, I've even been told, because I told you my ex-wife and I are in the process of a divorce, and so we have a
Mhm.
great relationship actually in making sure that we raise our kids. And I told her, she came over last week sometime. She was dropping the kids off, and she's like, "Hey, the house looks great." I'm like, "Yeah, it looks pretty good," but I'm like, "It's cold.
Mm.
It's cold." She's like, "I don't think so." I'm like, "Nah, like you can be honest, it's cold." And she's like, "Maybe a little." I'm like, "Well, what can
Yeah.
I do?" And she gave me a couple ideas, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that's exactly to your point. Like, I've thought about it. A woman takes resources, whatever those are, like you said, sperm or
Mhm.
sticks to build a house or whatever.
Mhm.
She takes the resources that we go out and we secure and provide as men, and she takes those and she refines them and hones them and tweaks them and adjusts them to make them something that's livable and consumable and beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I know that you have a background in the biblical stuff as well, right? Like at least growing up in the
I mean,
church or something like that.
I wouldn't say it like a background. I mean, I'm religious, I'm spiritual,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't say there's any sort of formal training or education or
Oh,
anything
okay.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked is because you probably know this, but like Proverbs 31 talks about like it talks specifically about a woman, and Proverbs written by Solomon, who's the wisest king from the Jewish heritage. But I think that's kind of where his wisdom is going. He's like, look, you can do all these things, but a woman will take whatever you're going to do and just make it more. And
Right.
as a man, I'm like, again, I come from that traditional feel about men and women. So for me, I go, I mean, even the order of man is protect, provide, and preside. I love that, and I resonate heavily with that. And then I take those and bring those to the table, and then my wife takes all of that and just expounds on it to a level that makes my family like feel like this is what I want, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I love
Yeah.
that about my relationship with her. And I think any man that doesn't see that isn't really trying to. I don't know. I think if we're willing to do what we're supposed to do and willing to like watch her, you will see that come about in your own
I th-
relationship.
I think what ends up happening a lot of the times is we see the women in our lives as important, a component of a good life. I would think, for the
Hmm.
most part,
Yeah.
on a uh, I think maybe a bad scale is men maybe tend to believe that they're good for sex and nothing more. I mean, I don't agree with
Right.
that, but I think that's what a lot of
Right.
guys might believe, and that I've even seen messages in the circles in which I run that perpetuate that idea.
Hmm.
But I found that the guys who seem to have an understanding that the relationship between a man and a woman is integrated, meaning that she is not just a component, a piece of the puzzle, but she is an integral part of the system, right? That like
Yeah. Yeah.
everything that's like it works together as a system, a cohesive unit because there's a woman involved. Is
Yeah.
I think that's I think that'll serve men better. I think they'll be more fulfilled. I think women will. And I think it's just a better way to look at human beings, let alone somebody you really love and care about.
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Yeah.
So do you have four kids or do you have, is it four?
I I have five.
Five. Five. Your oldest is 19. So you've been through 2 decades of raising kids. You know, we talked a lot about newborns and infants. And so for you, you know, what were some of the challenges as your children went from infant to toddler to teenager? We can talk about that. And then of course, beyond that.
I think that what I guess I didn't enjoy on the front end that now I try to savor and this is where like coming from my Instagram is this is where a lot of that comes from is that I looked back and went, man, I could have done so many more things better. And I don't mean like should have taken them more places and things like that. I could have just interacted and connected on a better level. I remember like when my oldest was little and he would cry because he couldn't talk yet. I'm like, I can't wait till you can talk. And then when he could talk, I'm
Mhm.
like, man, I can't wait till he can do this, or I can't wait till he can do that. And it's almost like we wish their life away. And so I found that because I was doing that along the way, I missed so many things. So it's funny because we worry when we talk about the challenges of like baby and then toddler. And you're right, teenage, oh my gosh, like teenage years are they're tough, right?
You
They're
have teenage daughters?
ridiculous. I have one teenage daughter. She's 16.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You're right in the throes of it.
So it's one of those things where I'm like, I look at my wife and I'm like, For real?" At one point, I think she was 13, and I said, where did my little girl go? Like, what happened that you're now like so angry?"
Yeah.
And,
The one thing that was funny to me, I heard somebody say one time, and it's a little crass, but it's funny. It makes sense. It's like when you have a son, you have to worry about one penis. When you have a
uh,
daughter, you have to worry about all the penises.
it's totally true. I said that when I first had my oldest, I said that to a guy who had only daughters, and he goes, "Yeah, but the worst thing she can," he's like, "What's the worst thing she can do?" And I'm like, "I guess she comes home saying she's pregnant." He's like, "Yeah," and he can come home and go, "Well, she's pregnant, and she's pregnant." And I was like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
"Oh,
Good. That's a good point too. Good. What?
right, yeah."
Okay. Point taken.
Yeah, that one hit me in the face. I'm like, "Oh no."
Yeah,
But
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, absolutely. So I guess when it comes down to it, like I'm trying to savor every moment. So my youngest is almost 3. She'll be 3 in July. I'm just enjoying, like, she's going through potty training right now, which potty training with the oldest was, it's so funny to see the difference. And everybody always says that the youngest is spoiled. I think parents just realized they didn't need to care as much about stuff, like
Mm.
I don't really need to worry about this or that, or my house needs to be clean. Dude, I've got drawings like underneath my desk. I have a standing desk. Underneath my desk, the whole wall right there has marker all over it, right? The Nate at 25 with a 1-year-old son would have been like, "Oh my gosh, just
Lift his
stop."
lid.
Yeah, dude, I'd have been out of my mind. At this point, I'm like, yeah, what, whatever. Like, make it work, and at some point, I'll paint it. Like, no big deal, right?
Right.
You've got stuff. Well, so we're potty training her, dude. She just she just runs out and wants to pee outside like the boys. So she runs out and pees outside. At one point, I think she pooped outside. I'm like, what is happening? We have savages in our house, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? She's learning the feel, and that's what is so important. The moment she realizes that she's got to go, now we just got to direct her back to the potty. That's all,
That's
you know.
right.
And so I'm just enjoying, and I know it sounds crazy, but I'm enjoying that part. She comes out, she's like, "Dad, I went pee in the potty," and then she's like, "Jelly beans," because I don't know about you, but I'm like, "Yeah, we're gonna give you jelly beans until we don't need to give you jelly beans to get you to do that." Um, the youngers that are just older than her, I've got 2 boys that are a year and 6 days apart, and they're in that 7 8 stage. So that's that whole like wrestling and all the things. I
Mhm.
mean, they're into fun stuff. It's fun to watch them grow into their personality. So Finn is my 7-year-old. He'll be 8 in August. He is hilarious, and he's catching on to like nuances of funny things. And then he'll be like, "Dad, and I'm just laughing about that. My youngest son Wyatt he's a real sensitive soul. I had a friend say that he sees more colors than we do a couple years ago, and I'm like, yeah, that describes him really well. Like, it's just that he feels deeper. So you're interacting with him a little differently. And then as they grow in, they're trying to become more and more dependent or independent. And I think that should start for us as dads. And it probably does, to let go faster. And I think parents who like helicopter and hold on to stuff real hard, they have a real hard time when it comes time for their 18-year-old to graduate and go to college, right? But if we're constantly giving them more and more independence, when that time comes, it's difficult, it's hard, it's sad. I mean, oh my gosh, like I've had plenty of times where I've just been sad my dude is not in the house. But it's also easier because I'm like, well, he's been doing some of these things already. I don't have to worry so much. There's just, but you're a parent. You're never not going to worry, but you're constantly trying to give independence. Um, at one point, I told this story on Instagram, but at one point he was dating this girl that I was like, dude, this is bad news. Like she is
Hmm.
not good. She's getting you to try to lie to us. You're trying to do things behind our back. This is all dangerous choices. And I mean, in that instance, that whole concept of like, oh, she's pregnant. The last thing I wanted to hear was that this girl was pregnant. Like I was scared to death about that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I just said to him, look, dude, I know this is your life. This is your game. But if you can understand that I'm up in the box watching the whole field, trying to make calls and help you understand, I'm like, all you can see is the defender in front of you. But I've got the whole field view. So when I say like, slant left, like I'm not doing that because I'm trying to be a jerk. I'm doing that because I can see a defender coming to smash your face. And
Mm.
at that point, like he was in football. I never played football. I just was like, all right, like this kind of worked. But he had been, and he kind of got it. I mean, it still took him like realizing it himself. But that moment, I was like, I'm just a coach. Like, I'm here and I've got responsibilities to you, but I'm really at the point in your life where all I can do is say, I've been down this road on my own. And now I'm standing on the side of the field or up in the box watching you play your game. And all I can do is toss out ideas and give you some advice because you're going to do what you're going to do. At teenage, I mean, you probably the same way, but I mean,
Of
I
course.
didn't want to listen to my parents. Like they didn't know anything.
They're
You
idiots.
don't. Yeah, exactly. So the last thing I want to do is, push down hard on you're not dating this girl, you can't be around her. The only thing I could do is say, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm seeing. I love you and I want you to make good choices, but if I push hard on this, he's gonna go behind my back and it may even be worse.
Right. Yeah. He may do it out of just pure spite at that point.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Cut your nose off
One
to
thing,
spite your face kind of thing.
right. One thing you said is letting go a bit. And I thought that was powerful because I think the greater risk, and not only in my own life, but in talking with hundreds, if not thousands of guys about this, is the greater risk is not that you're going to be too disciplinarian, that you're not going to be, like you're not going to do it enough, that you're not going to be as disciplinarian as you need to, or you're not going to be as
Right.
structured as you need to. That's not the risk for guys. Like it really
It's
isn't.
not.
Like guys,
Yeah.
we can get rid of that notion. Like
Hmm.
it's not like anybody listening to this podcast, and I'm sure much of the people who follow you, like they don't have a concern about like, oh, am I going to provide enough structure? Trust me, like you need, I'm speaking to myself, you need to
Sure.
learn to let go a little bit and enjoy, and the paint and the markers on the wall, like,
Mhm.
maybe there's, some painting that takes place and you have your kid participate in that, cleaning stuff up. But like, we all need to let go a little bit. I think that would serve
Yeah.
us all very, very well.
And I actually think that that's where most guys they balk at that because they don't think that that's the case.
I
They
do.
think that yeah, I mean that's where I was, and I still in that way at times. I'm like oh, and that's where I feel like I'm telling guys, hey, we should be this way, and then I'm still having to tell myself that and having to live through that and push myself to a new level of relaxing because I know that I'm going to be structured enough and disciplinary enough. The truth is I'm probably so much overboard of that they could probably use a lot less of that than I really think they could.
Yeah. Yeah. How's it been with your oldest now out of the house? Like, has that changed? I mean, I guess it's a little different than you because you still have four at home, it sounds like,
Sure.
but has that changed your identity at all? I know a lot of guys who they become empty nesters. And again, you're not, I understand that, but become
Mhm.
empty nesters and it's like restarting life. I've had friends who are like, man, my kids are out of the house and like, I don't even know if I love my wife anymore because we haven't even focused on each other for the past 20 years. I don't know any of this stuff. I'm really curious what you
Sure.
think about that.
Yeah, I can see where that would be the case. I mean, if you really are honed in on your kids that much all the time and you fall into I don't want to say a rut, but more of a routine of this is the way life is. I think that the letting go helps that. I think as you give them more as you give them more freedom, you gain more freedom. So you have the ability to do that. So like you said, yeah, we're still in the, I mean, my youngest probably 95% of the time is in our bed. So like we don't have that yet, even though we have one out of the house. I say I've got one in college and one in diapers, and that's just kind of like that's the nature of my life. So I don't feel like empty nester like that. But I think that if we don't focus, I feel like I've heard this on your on this podcast. Like if we don't focus on our relationship, we will do that. We'll wake up one day, kids will be out of the house, and I've got nothing that I have in common with this woman anymore. And honestly, my wife is awesome. I want to make sure that never happens. So I really do. I think that takes a lot of, it takes focus, and you just got to make sure you keep after it.
Yeah, I know with my own relationship, that was a big part of the problem. I tend to focus so heavily, not necessarily on the kids, but on work, that the
Mm,
relationship with my kids and wife comes at the expense of those things. And so, you do that long enough and it's like, I mean, you can't recover from, right?
it's true.
So I hope
Yeah.
guys stay vigilant with it. How have you found balancing that though? With four kids at home, you've got a toddler, you've got three other kids, you've got a wife who obviously you love and you want to spend time with her and be with her. Like, what does date night look for like for you guys? How do you guys get your time alone, intimacy, that sort of thing, with the
Sure.
fact that you have four other little humans that are relying upon you guys?
Right. I would say I fail more on this particular front. I think we don't have a specific night. We might be crazy, but when it comes to like having our kids watched by somebody else, I'm horribly vigilant and very not trusting. So
I don't think
even some
that's
of my
crazy. I think that's smart. I mean, I think that's wise and prudent.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even some of my best friends, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do that, and we don't normally go very far when we do it. We have a really close friend just down the street that will take them every once in a while. And so for us, it's just kind of we we end up doing it in the evenings where the kids finally go down for to sleep, and we spend a little bit of time together in that way, shape, or form. And then here and there, we'll try and get away where we can just go out. Sometimes she's like, I just want to have a beer with my husband. I'm like, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to do it. And I hear a lot of guys say you've got to put that time in. We started our relationship not very structured at all, like, oh, we just love hanging out and it's great and all that. And the more people you add to your family and all of that, the structure I used to fight against is now what I crave. In like, I would be okay with Wednesday nights we go out, or Thursday night I would be okay with knowing that that's date night, because at least I'm not going to miss her. And I think that there's something to be said about structuring it. We're so we're because of our younger kids, I'm so vigilant about who watches them that you can't guarantee that that's going to happen every time. And so,
Yeah.
and finding a babysitter where, I mean, at this point in the game, babysitters want, I think, practically like $30 an hour. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to spend as much out on a date as I am for it's like triple the
Yeah.
cost to have a date night. So that can be rough for a lot of guys, I think, or a lot of people.
How are you guys on on bedtimes? Like I have, a different couple of different schools of thought. One school of thought is like, oh, we're pretty liberal and loose with when they go to bed and when they're tired. I'm like, I never bought into that personally, but okay. Like I'm
Yeah,
rigid. Like you go to bed
yeah,
at
yeah.
this time, you go to bed at this time. And as they get older, we bump that back
Sure.
and let them stay up a little bit later, give them a curfew if they're out with their friends. But are you guys pretty tight on
Yeah.
the schedules and inner routines that way?
I would say I was. I won't say that I'm like fully off of it, but I used to be so rigid that like the moment 8 o'clock hit, if they weren't in bed, I start like the rage started to rise in my
Mm,
heart. It's like,
yeah.
and by 9 o'clock, I'm checked out because I'm so mad that if I talk to anybody, it's gonna not be nice. That kind of thing. That's the way I was. I still have to back off of that, but I've gotten a lot more loose on that because I'm going, all right, well, if your bedtime routine is normal, especially for the youngers, for the olders, like the oldest one, I never had a curfew, and which is probably crazy on my parents' part, but I kind of followed suit with that. Where I'm just like, I just need to know where you are. Tell me who you're with. Like I don't like, and then I need to know when you get home. Um, and so that's kind of I play that through from. that comes from my growing up because I didn't really have a curfew. The youngers, I'm like, all right, between 8 and 9, we probably need to be getting them in bed by 9 o'clock. It's very rare we go past that. But I think that those people that are out there saying if you have a structured bedtime where the kids know what's going to happen, you have a higher likelihood of getting them to bed on time. I mean, I am living proof that that is the case. The more structured that time frame is, they know, okay, beds, like bath and then books and then bedtime kind of thing. If you do that, to dads who are new, if you start that early, I think you're going to have a lot more success in getting them down at the right time. Um, and then kids are constantly going to get out of bed. I need water, or I just had this thought, or what are we doing tomorrow? I mean,
You don't
and I used to
care.
get,
Just go to
yeah,
bed.
yeah. I still do it. I'm like, oh, I can't talk. I'm like, go ahead, Maggie. You're just gonna have to deal with it because if I deal with it, it's gonna be bad. I've started to let go of that where I'm like, yeah, man, come on, it's fine. Yeah, tomorrow we're gonna do this, or whatever your question is, and then I'll be like, all right, go to bed. After
Yeah.
15 times, you're like, okay, it's time to be done. Now I'm out of my mind. But for the most part, they're less likely to do that from what I've seen. The more we spend time with them, and honestly, to the dads who don't want that happening, and they get frustrated, especially with youngers, my suggestion is lay in bed with them. Just lay in
Mm.
bed, let them talk. Um, I didn't do that a lot, and now they're old enough where like that's not something they like need or want. But I can tell that the 3-year-old will need that, and that's what I'll do. Just lay in bed with them, let them talk until you probably fall asleep. They'll fall asleep, and then you wake up and have the rest of your night with your wife or whatever. Um,
Right.
I mean, that makes it so much softer and calmer that it's okay. You know?
Yeah. One thing my 7-year-old does is if we go to the grocery store, he wants to hold my hand, and I'm cool with that. I love that
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
he's the last one. This is the last one who's going to hold my hand for very much longer.
Yeah.
And he'll grab the cart. He'll put his hand on the cart as I'm pushing the
Hmm.
cart. He'll put his hand on it, and it's super annoying, like super obnoxious, because he's pulling on it or he's like hanging on it, and I'm like, gosh, damn, this is obnoxious. And then I have managed up to this point to catch myself and say, you know what, the kid wants to hold on to the cart because his dad's
Yeah.
pushing it, and like it's an opportunity for me to be a little closer to him. So just embrace it. Just
Hmm.
embrace it. Like I wish I would have done that with my 15-year-old. I didn't, but I wish I would
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I feel that. I'm with you on that. I pick up my youngest just about every time she asks for that reason. Because one day it'll be the last time she asks, and the last thing I want to do is miss that and feel like I should have done it more. At least I'll be able to go, "Oh, girl, I picked you up as many times as you wanted every time."
I said this in an Instagram post or a Facebook post years ago, I think at this point, and it almost went viral a little bit. And it was, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, consider that there's going to come a point in time where you're going to put your kid down and you're never going to pick them up again.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that, there's a time where you're never going to pick them, and you don't know what it is, but it's going
Right.
to happen. And
Yeah.
that's a really sobering thought for sure.
Oh, that hits me in my soul, dude. Like for real. That one punches me right there to a level where I'm like my eyes fill up with tears and I'm like, man, I hope that doesn't happen just yet. But you're spot on, man. And it's like a lot of us miss that, we're so busy trying to get them to bed so I can do something else, or we got to eat fast because we got this going on, or we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And the beauty of kids, and Dr. Shafali is she's great, like psychiatrist. She does like family and all that. One of the things she says is the beauty of children is they force us to be present because that's the only thing they know. And I love that because, that's only been a recent read for me, but and interacting with her, but I love that because the more I've felt myself feeling that, I've got one out of the nest already, and feeling that regret, the more I want to like just drive into that part of life with my kids where just let me hold you longer. I think there's a book like that's like Let Me Hold You Longer, and I
I
know
don't
that
know.
like every woman that reads it like just cries because it's literally that whole thing. You read a book and by the time you're done reading it, your kid is grown up, and so you close it, you look at him, you're like, oh, I love you, and all that.
That's funny. I'll have to check that
But it's
out.
true, man. It's totally true. Like you're spot on. Like that. Oh, yeah, hits me right in the soul face.
Yeah, the soul face. Well, One thing I'm hearing you say is you're talking about with the kids and your wife, and you said you're not the greatest at date night necessarily, but one thing I did hear you say is that you guys are intentional about it and you're aware of it, and it's something on your mind. I think what ends up happening is we have these kids that we love and care about and want to pour completely into, and that's good. That's right. You
Mhm.
should want to do
Yeah.
that. But we aren't real intentional or vigilant, I think is the word you used, about ensuring that our wife gets our attention too. Because one thought I had is that, your kids are going to be with you for about 2 decades.
Mhm.
That's it. They're going to go out, they're going to do their thing, they're going to have their spouses and their families, but they're going to be with you for 2 decades.
Mhm.
Your wife could potentially 5 decades, six
Mhm.
decades. Like you probably ought to continue to foster that relationship because at some point the kids are gone and it's just you and your wife.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, savor what you got with all of them. I mean, you've been talking a lot more recently about presence, which I loved your post when you went hiking with your kids. I thought that was great. But it's that kind of stuff, being able to just focus in on the moment instead of instead of being somewhere else. And I feel like sometimes I feel crazy. I feel like I'm all alone in this. But the truth is, when I hear you talking about it and I hear other guys or I'm talking with other guys, I feel like we all do this to ourselves. We spend so much time worrying about the future, whether it's because finances are tough or, whatever it is, we've got all these worries. So we're either in the future or we're in the past thinking about what I should have done. I should have done this, I should have done that. And the truth is, if we can get ourselves to really hone in on right now, w- you got it pretty good. I mean, there might be some people out there that don't, but I know that I can do that. I can put myself in a place of total fear if I just keep thinking about the future and I don't sit in the present. Or if I keep thinking about the past, I'm going to regret stuff or be frustrated. But if I can sit in the present with my kids, with my wife, with like when I'm hanging out like on this podcast, when I'm hanging out with friends, if we can just be present, that our whole perspective changes, and it we realize how good we've got it.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for single fathers? There's a lot of guys who tune in. I'm a single father. There's a lot of guys who are
Yeah.
single fathers that are listening who, they don't have. I jokingly, but also seriously say that there used to be a point in time, even just a year ago, where I had 50% of the responsibilities 100% of the time.
Mm,
And now I have 100% of the responsibilities 50% of the time. So
right.
it changes. It's such a weird, it's really been I've really had to adapt and evolve and figuring this situation out, navigating this. But
Yeah,
yeah, a
yeah.
lot of guys don't have their kids half time. A lot of guys maybe don't see their kids at all, or they talk to them on the phone. Is there any advice that you have for these guys of making the most of their relationship with their kids in limited interaction situations?
Sure, absolutely. Well, what I can tell you is my first two kids were from a previous marriage. So I
Oh,
have
really?
that
Okay.
experience. Yeah, I have that experience. That's why there's a gap. It's 19, 16,
Hmm.
and then 7, 6, and 3.
Makes
But
sense.
like
Okay, got
I
it.
have that experience in a sense because I have the three that are the younger are with me all the time. But the older two were 50% with their mom and 50% with us. And I'll say that the one again, some of that regret was I need to talk to them more. Like being present comes into play really heavily there, right? And as guys, more often than not, we're like, I've got to work. Like I can't not work. So now they're here, but I'm still gonna have to work. I'm still gonna have to do these things. And I'm not saying women don't do that, but for real, let's be honest. Like I spend most of my time going, I'm gonna have to work. I got to make money. We've got to do these things. The thing I would say is, if you're in a situation where it doesn't sound like it is this way for you, but like if you have to fight for your kids, fight tooth and nail, like go for it, because they not only they need their mom, but they need their dad, and they deserve you, and they deserve your time, and you have to fight because, in my opinion, the system is bent away from you. It's slanted toward mom, and that's difficult to fight, but you have to go all out to be able to have your children and have the influence you need to have over them because they deserve dad. And then as far as time with them, uh, you know, this little 3 by 4 inch or 5 by 4 inch, 5 by 3 inch box that we use on a daily basis can really suck our time away from everything. So if you have your kids 50% of the time, when you're with them, be with them. Just turn that thing off. I mean, what if you're going to take some photos? Great, but really, you don't have any need for it. It's you don't have any need for it outside of that. Don't be texting and things like that. Like but that's the kind of advice I would give any dad at any time. You know what I mean? Like
Good
turn your phone
point.
off or put it somewhere else. Just be dad, be present, and just know that since you only have so much time with them, just suck the marrow out of that time, because at some point you'll take them to college and you'll feel the weight of what I felt. You
Yeah, I
know?
mean, if there's one bit of silver, I mean, there's a lot of silver linings with what's going on in my own personal life, but one of those is that it's made me hyper effective in other avenues of my life, like business, super effective, super efficient, because I realized like, hey, I have my kids every Wednesday and Thursday and every other weekend. I'm like, okay, I've got Tuesday and Thursday, or excuse me, Monday and Tuesday to kick ass.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I got to get it done in these, I got to get four
absolutely.
days worth of work done in these 2 days. And it's totally possible. It's
Hmm.
amazing what we think is impossible until the time constraint is shortened, and then we still get it done. We're like, oh wait, maybe I wasn't as effective as I could have been all those other times where I was dragging
Yeah,
my feet. And I think it's called oh, it's a principle. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but the principle is basically, your work expands to the time allotted. So
yeah,
which
yeah.
means
I've
if you
heard
can
that.
track the time, then your work will fit into that time the same as it would if you had double or triple the time before. So it's kind of an interesting
Absolutely.
concept.
Yeah, no, I've heard that, and I completely agree. I've been in that situation where I'm like, I got 2 hours to get this done, and holy cow, I got it done in 2 hours. Where the other day it could have taken me eight if I had eight. It's just,
Yeah, man.
yeah, no, I think that's cool. It's cool to see. It's that you're in a difficult spot, but at the same time, I think dads, that if you'll take advantage of that, you can spend as much time with your kids as you want, and it won't feel like you've only got them here and there. You when you're working, and when you're with them, you're with them.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do for sure.
The other thing I've noticed is that we do a lot more interesting and fun things together because when I do
Hmm.
have them, because it's again, it's 50% of the time, like, let's go do
Sure.
something awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas before it's like, I have them all the time. We can go do that tomorrow. We can go do that next weekend. I'm like, no, no, no. Like, we have to do that this weekend because I won't see him for another 5 days. So
Yeah.
it becomes a lot more again, silver lining to a bad situation, but it becomes
Right.
a lot more enjoyable because we're actively going out and doing unique and fun and interesting things that maybe we wouldn't have done in any other context.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. I think you're not taking them for granted when like now you kind of can't, whereas
Mhm.
like when you guys were together, she handled some stuff, you were there, like you might have dinner all the time. Like at some point in the evening, you were going to see them if you were working all day and stuff like that. And now you don't have that. And so you're, like you said, it's a silver lining to a difficult situation, but now you want to make sure that you take advantage of that time. So
Right.
I think,
Right.
yeah, that's good. I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad to hear that, because you've been talking about it, but you're experiencing it, which is why you're experiencing the need to be present, and so you are, and that it's affecting your life in a good way, even in the midst of difficult times. That's massive.
Yeah. Well, Nate, man, I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you. I follow all of your Instagram posts, and some of them are funny and they're all informative. They really help me personally, so I'm glad that we could connect. I think when we try to do this, and we had some technological disruptions last week. I think you mentioned that maybe you have a book coming out soon, or you're working on a book. Is that right?
Working on a book. Yeah, working on a
Okay.
book. Just the concept of more so how that whole idea that more is caught than taught, in just the sense. So it's like my father before me, just understanding that everything I do, I mean, I can say everything I want, but they're gonna do what I do. So what am I doing? And that's
Yeah.
kind of the concept there.
When does the book come out? Do you know?
It's still in the early stages, so I'd like to
Okay.
have it out within the next year.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I know that. Do you have a publisher? Are you self-publishing or what?
I'm gonna self-publish this one. See how
Yeah,
it goes.
man, that's a good
Yeah.
route. That's a good route, especially where you already have a platform and an audience. I think there's obviously benefits to having a publisher, but sometimes the turnaround time on that and the constraints in which you need to operate are a little tight. So I like the self-publishing route as well.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head's been. I got a friend from high school. He does some of that stuff, so I've reached out to him about, just kind of help me stay along with it. I'm actually on day 71 of 75 hard,
Mm.
and
Oh, awesome.
my wife is like anti that, not in the sense other than she's like, you got to eat weird and you're constantly having to go do like all that stuff, but
You're irritable.
but she's also said you should 75 hard, that kind of stuff. And so what it's done for me mentally is go, okay, I just, you're doing a grind, you're doing it on a daily basis. And so that's what will happen on this. I was saying I was nervous about day 76, and she's like, just start your 75 hard, like the other things you want to do. And so
That's a good
that will
idea.
be, yeah.
Yeah,
She's
both of
wicked
my
smart, man.
books. Yeah, they are. We don't give them as much credit as they deserve, but they are. Holy cow.
Yeah.
um, that's actually what I did with my two books is I wrote both of them in about 90 days, give or take, because I just
Yeah.
decided I'm going to write 1,000 words per day, every day
Hmm.
until it's done.
Yeah.
And I talk with people like, oh yeah, I've been writing a book for 5 years. I'm like, come on now, five
Yeah.
years? Like, what
Yeah.
are you writing? Like War and Peace or what? Like, come, come
Yeah.
on. Like that
Well,
should be done in the next 2 months. Let's go. If you're serious about it, you can do it. Let's go.
that's pretty much where I've come from, because I've had concepts of books and different ideas from different things that I've like in life. And this one came and I was like, I'm just going to sit down and make that happen. And so that's like, I told her, you and I talking, I'm like, this has to happen because it's like now we're coming through this whole concept of 75 hard, 90 days, whatever, but daily, just get in,
Same concept.
grind it
Yeah.
out, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on, brother. Tell the guys where to connect with you and learn a little bit more about what you're up to.
Absolutely. At dads don't babysit. That's dads underscore don't underscore babysit, is where I spend a lot of my time. Nate Feathers on Facebook. I'm here and there, but that's the major has been social media. That kind of blew up on me without me even realizing it was going to go that
I
way. And
bet.
so it's been a fun trip, but that's where I spend a lot of my time.
You do a lot of good videos, just quick snippets of information about things that dads need to know. Are you doing anything on TikTok too? Is that something you've delved into at all?
I haven't, and I'm like, I'm the kind of guy that I'm like, well, I'm doing it on Instagram. Do I need to do it on TikTok? And the truth is, I should. And so it's been one of those things where my wife's like, just take your videos, put them on TikTok, see what happens. And so they may see me there
Yeah.
soon. I'm just not there just yet.
I'm not either. I have thoughts on. I'm like you. I'm like I should do that. I haven't, but I should.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of video content, audio content that would be translatable
Right.
over there. I think if you're posting
Yeah.
it anyways, like we probably ought to post it over there. But then I also get into the whole China thing, and I'm like, okay, at what point are we? You hear people say, well, that's a Chinese spy thing or whatever. It's like, okay, if you really believe that, then you wouldn't have an account.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
what is it? Are you a principled person or are you not? So
Well,
that's
my
kind
thing
of where
was
my
not
hang up is.
my thing wasn't that. It was more so like my 16-year-old daughter's on it and doing all these dances and
Oh
stuff and all
yeah, with
that
all the
kind of
weird
stuff.
stuff that
And
yeah.
I'm kind of like, oh, I'm just too old for that. But honestly, there's tons of people in their 40s doing plenty of stuff over there that is making a difference. That's massive.
Well, just know if you're on there, I'm gonna say, man, I don't know if this guy's principled anymore. So just throw that out there. All
Oh
right, brother, we're
shoot.
gonna
Well,
sync it all up. No, I don't know. I don't want to plant that in your ear. We're gonna sync it all up
totally
for
fine.
the guys. But I appreciate you. I learned a lot from you. You've helped me be a better father. And thanks for joining us today, man.
Thanks, man. That's huge. Thank you.